I'm always worried about a shutdown, but I think we've been through this several times before, and we've seen it, and we know how it's going to play out. And it's going to play out ultimately with Speaker Johnson needing the Democrats to pass a short-term stopgap 3-month CR. That is exactly what has happened the last couple times that we've been through this brinksmanship. And it's bewildering why he continues to do it again and again and again. It's the definition of insanity to think that something will be different. But here we are recognizing 3 weeks before that this is not going to happen.
This is a familiar feeling, I'm afraid, Congressman, to your point. We've seen this movie before. The talk is then, if not 6 months, 3 months. Is that what happens? We fund the government through the end of the year, and whoever wins the election, the next president, is going to have to deal with this problem on day one.
Well, I think part of the point of actually doing it in mid-December is so that whoever becomes president does not have to deal with this on day one, that we will get it done before the new president, who I believe will be Kamala Harris, takes office on January 20th. And that's the way it should be done, and that's the way that I expect it to be done. But it just goes to show, Joe, how consistent and continuous the Republicans are in playing games with our government, with our national security, with our veterans, with the things that matter to the American people. And it is political brinksmanship after political brinksmanship. They are not serious about doing the actual work to solve the problems for the American people. That has been the story this entire Congress, and that is why Democrats need to win in November so that Democratic majority can actually do the work for the American people that the Democrat majority did in the last Congress, and that basically the Democratic minority has done this Congress, because everything that has passed Congress has required Democrats.
Well, if the idea here is then to do a stopgap through December and then somehow craft a real budget with 12 spending bills in regular order, it would take a Christmas miracle, Congressman. And I would love to be talking to you about that if it gets that far by the end of the year. But I want to ask you about the debate last night. I know you were watching here, and I know the matter of Ukraine is important to you. Or support for the war in Ukraine, knowing that you were the lead counsel in the first impeachment against Donald Trump, which brought us back to the original perfect phone call, as we all remember. Donald Trump said a couple of things last night. If he had been president, this war never would have started. Vladimir Putin never would have invaded Ukraine. He also said if Kamala Harris gets elected, that this is going to take a very different direction. Do you believe that's true, that this war would not have happened with Donald Trump in office?
Absolutely not. The war happened because Donald Trump had messed around and undermined our alliances with our allies, to the point where there was so much discord and disagreement between Donald Trump and our closest allies that Vladimir Putin believed that it was the opportune time for him to make his illegal and improper invasion of a democratic state, Ukraine, next door to him. And the reason why Vladimir Putin so desperately wants Donald Trump to be president again, and why he is paying social media, right-wing media, to promote Russian propaganda to help Donald Trump win, is because he knows that he has Donald Trump wrapped around his finger. And the reality is Donald Trump could not even say last night that he wants the democratic Ukraine to beat and win this war against the dictator Vladimir Putin from Russia. That is all you need to know. This man coddles up to dictators, and he undermines democracy both here at home and abroad. And it's why so many of the national security officials who worked for Donald Trump have said that he is unfit to be president and that they are supporting Kamala Harris. This is a critical issue, and that specific answer was so telling as to who Donald Trump is and what kind of presidency a Trump 2.0 would be. It would be a red carpet for Vladimir Putin to take over Ukraine and expand into Europe.
Well, it's interesting because Kamala Harris said last night that if Donald Trump were elected, Vladimir Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. But the fact of the matter is, Congressman, we've talked to the president of Poland. President Duda sat here right at the table with us. We had the same conversation with Oksana Markarova, the ambassador of Ukraine to the United States. When we asked them about what a Trump 2.0 would mean for U.S. support for NATO and the war in Ukraine, they both said, hey, Donald Trump gave Ukraine lethal weapons when others would not, and he deserves credit for that. Are they wrong?
Well, that is factually correct. But then he withheld those lethal weapons in order to coerce and extort the president of Ukraine to make up a bogus investigation to help Donald Trump's election and his electoral prospects. And so, yes, on the one hand, that's right, but this is the problem with Donald Trump. You can't trust him because when push comes to shove, he will always put his personal interest over the country's. And so he may do something the right way because he doesn't care about it, he's not paying attention to it. But if he finds something that he can do that can help him personally, he will always do that. And that's why he got impeached the first time, is because he illegally withheld essential military and financial support for Ukraine against Russia. And so that's obviously why Vladimir Putin is so eager for Donald Trump to become president again.
You know, you saw it, Congressman. Donald Trump was given several occasions last night, several opportunities to say that he wanted Ukraine to win the war. Each time he would simply say he wanted the war to end. How do you interpret that?
I interpret it exactly as you did, which is it's one thing if he perhaps doesn't answer the question once, but I believe he was asked 3 times, and he refused to say that he preferred that the democratic, independent, sovereign nation of Ukraine that was invaded by a dictator, Vladimir Putin, would win the war. And then when he talks about in grandiose terms how, and he consistently does this, he would end it on day 1 before he's even president. And you ask him, how are you going to do that? Never once has he provided any information about how he's going to do that. And we all know the reason why. And Vice President Harris said it last night, because he will just allow Vladimir Putin to walk over Ukraine and to take over Kyiv and to take over a democratic nation for the first time since World War II. So you don't have to dig deep to figure out what Donald Trump wants. He makes it very clear. And what he wants is for dictators and strongmen like Viktor Orban, who he bragged about, and Vladimir Putin to be his friends. Those are his models, not democracies like Ukraine.
Well, Congressman, you represent New York's 10th district, and this is an awfully important day here, this 11th of September, for the people in your district, for you, for the people of New York City, for everyone who's listening and watching this right now. I was struck this morning to see the images from Lower Manhattan in this memorial service that we've grown so used to every year, to see Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, all standing together to pay tribute. What does that tell us about the significance of this day?
Well, it tells us many things. First of all, this was the anniversary of the worst terrorist attack against the United States on U.S. soil in history. And it is critical that we never forget that we have enemies abroad who want to destroy us. And that still remains the case. It's also a time to appreciate and remember all of the first responders who so bravely went into ground zero, into the towers first, and then cleaned off the pile, many, many thousands of whom are now suffering from mental health consequences, or rather health consequences. But the other thing, Joe, and I think this is really, really important, 9/11 was a day that brought all Americans together, whether you were Democratic or you were Republican or you were independent or nothing. That day, we were all Americans. And this morning, as we stood there at 9/11, we were just Americans, there to commemorate one of the worst days in American history. And it is really, really important, even in our divisive and polarized political times, that we remember we are all Americans. We all love this country. We all want this country to be better. And that was, to me, so much of the takeaway this morning as I stood next to Rudy Giuliani and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and President Biden, Vice President Harris, Senator Schumer, Governor Hochul.
Yes.
it didn't matter what parties we were for this day, because we were commemorating an American holiday, which is now 9/11.